Hi, this is Marie Presley, and welcome to my capstone voiceover, Equity in Mathematics, an analysis of research in culturally responsive pedagogy and equitable math practices. Without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. Understanding how to effectively teach a culturally and linguistically diverse classroom can be a substantial task for a seasoned educator, let alone a pre-service or new teacher. Research shows that equitable practices can be achieved through investigating effective classroom practices to serve culturally and ethnically diverse student populations as well as English language learners. Achieving equity in the mathematics classroom has been studied for decades, and the research surrounding the topic has evolved with our increasingly diverse classrooms. Many typical mathematics classrooms are comprised of students from multiple ethnicities as well as English language learners, and teachers must adapt their lesson plans to meet the needs of all of their students. However, as a pre-service teacher myself that will be teaching in my first classroom within a year, I felt underprepared to tackle the challenges of my undoubtedly culturally and linguistically diverse first classroom. In this study, I am going to research methods for pre-service teachers such as myself to be more suitably prepared to address the needs of a diverse classroom to promote equity in mathematics. Specifically, what culturally responsive pedagogy practices are vital for all teachers to implement to promote equity for cultural diversity in English language learners. In this study, we're going to go over what our future classrooms will be and what they will look like. What does research say about equity and diversity? What specific cultural responsive pedagogy practices can teachers adopt right now, and equity practices for English language learners? Mathematics education research and what it says about equity. The student population in the United States is becoming more and more racially and culturally diverse. Specifically, from 2001 to 2011, the proportion of public school enrollment composed of racial and ethnic minority students went from 40% to 48%. So in just 10 years, it jumped up 8% and is projected to go to 55% by 2023. Children of certain racial, ethnic, language, gender, ability, and socioeconomic background experience math education very differently, and many are disaffected by math education experiences at all. A substantial amount of research in mathematics education seeks to document imbalances and achievements between middle-class white students and students who are Black, Latinx, First Nation, English language learner, and of working class. In recent years, research has evolved from focusing on the achievement gap between certain races and cultures and gaining a greater understanding of the relationships of teaching and learning and how relationships affect the outcomes of our traditionally marginalized students. The performance gap among students from various cultures and races and those designated with special needs have persisted despite significant efforts in mathematics education research. To close the existing gaps, educators at all levels must work to achieve equity with respect to student learning outcomes. A steadfast dedication to this effort requires that educators believe that all students can learn. Equity in mathematics. Mathematics educators talk about all children having access to quality mathematics, yet we do not respect the same way that all children experience with mathematics, particularly their experiences from their community and home environments. In many cases, equity in mathematics is an addendum or is a tokenized in educational process. Adding a last-minute equity amendment to a document or sending an equity expert to a meeting is merely putting equity as a peripheral afterthought instead of putting the issue central to our profession. This approach is basically taking equity and looking at it is not looking at it from a holistic perspective. A recent instance of this division, rather than the inclusion of equity from a prominent educational standard document, the Common Core State Standards, the CCSM principal documents pertaining to two explicit demographic groups, children with disabilities and English language learners, is a separate document. Neither application document is connected to the main CCSM document, nor are they readily visible on the official website for access. This is a purposeful separation from the growing inclusion in equity-based mathematics education research and raises serious questions about the intent and scope of such policy documents to positively affect mathematics. Equity in mathematics needs to be equity and mathematics, not equity or mathematics. So what we need to do is we need to centralize equity and look at it from a holistic perspective and not look at it from a separate perspective. Equity needs to be at the forefront and not an addendum or afterthought in our policy-making decisions. What counts as mathematics? And who decides what counts as mathematics and what mathematics students should learn? Why does algebra, for example, have an aura of prestige? Algebra is still being used as a sieve into further mathematics and mathematics at higher levels at high school and college. The 2008 National Council of Teachers of Math position statement on equity calls for students to have access to and engage in challenging, rigorous, and meaningful mathematical experiences, and to build their relationship with mathematics that is positive and grounded in their own cultural roots and history. Mathematics learning is a political act. For the future, asset-based practices in mathematics education are a mindful way to move away from insufficiency perspectives that view students, parents, and communities as lacking in various aspects to enable them to be ready for higher level mathematics. An asset-based approach is grounded in the belief that students, families, and communities' way of knowing and including their language and culture serves as an intellectual resource and contribute greatly to the teaching and learning of high-quality mathematics. This approach draws from the students' funds of knowledge work in which researchers and teachers learn with and from the student, parents, and community. Effective strategies or classroom strategies for all students. These are basic practices and under an understanding and a high-level overview of what is the focus and the fundamental perspectives with response to cultural responsive pedagogy. Teachers' exchanges with students, which are social and therefore culturally meaningful, have a great impact on student identity, development, and believed ability to do math. In the mathematics classroom, teacher-student, student-student, and all other exchanges frame individual realisms, constructions of mathematical knowledges, and an individual's relationship to mathematics are very personal and are influenced greatly by the individual's experiences with mathematics, many of which are fostered by the teacher. Data from multiple peer-reviewed research articles suggest that relationships and trust in the classroom not only are foundational of culturally responsive mathematics teaching, but also mediate knowledge and communication in the mathematics classroom for all students. Relationships and trust are the mediator of knowledge and learning. An individual's relationship with math is fostered by the relationship with a teacher. If the teacher is not building trust, student learning is hindered. The opposite is true with regards to the lack of attention to the relationship to building. For example, if a teacher is not acquiring knowledge about student and is not communicating in a culturally associative way, relationships are limited and trust is not developed. In many cases, a lack of trust grows in between the student and the teacher. I really like this visual and this comes from Emily Bonner's 2014 research on culturally responsive pedagogy, and it shows how relationship and trust is central to being effective at culturally responsive teaching. It also shows that power can also be the mediator of communication and the mediator of knowledge. If a teacher does not share power in the classroom with their student, communication is hindered and knowledge is also hindered. So these relationship and trust is foundational. A sharing of power is a mediator of communication and knowledge in the classroom. Effective culturally responsive teaching practices for English language learners. Mathematics present a particularly elusive challenge for our English language learners. Many mathematics teachers struggle with ways of creating a classroom environment that support English language learners both socially and academically. Linguistic minorities in the United States too often sit quietly in the mathematics classroom without engaging in classroom discussions. They do not feel comfortable to use opportunities to experiment with language, particularly in the specialized language of mathematics. So how do we support participation of English language learners in the mathematics classroom? Research-based strategies are key to supporting English language learners' mathematical proficiency. Here are some of the stated researched effective strategies that have shown effectively to support ELLs in the classroom. Number one, connect mathematics with student life experiences. This is basically gaining and growing and understanding the student. Every student can learn, and all students have a funds of knowledge. Create classroom environments that are rich in language and mathematical content. So don't limit English language learners' content because keep their mathematical problems. They need to be rich and robust and not simplified because they are an English language learner. Emphasize meaning and multiple meanings of words. Vocabulary can be very, very confusing for an English language learner, and the English language has a lot of nuances. So students may need to communicate meaningfully by using gestures, drawings, or their first language while they develop command of their English language and mathematics. Use visual supports such as concrete objects, videos, and illustrations and gestures for classroom conversation. This will greatly enhance the conceptual knowledge and just understanding of mathematics for an English language learner. Connect language with mathematical representations by pictures, tables, and graphs. Write essential ideas, concepts, representations, and words on the board without erasing them so the students can refer to them. This is imperative. Mathematical language is very complex, and so if we're having a mathematical conversation in the classroom, having these words, these mathematical concepts or mathematical vocabulary on the board or somewhere posted in the classroom that the student can use to reference is important so they don't feel confused during mathematical conversations. And discuss examples of students' mathematical writing and provide opportunity for students to revise their writing. This is also very important. Tying together language and just another way to communicate mathematics in the classroom is going to greatly increase their overall conceptual knowledge of math. Some specific strategies for English language learners that you can use in the classroom are cognate charts, word walls, and mathematical vocabulary lists. These have been shown to be specifically effective for our English language learners. Cognate charts, the diagram on the right, shows that how some languages or some mathematical words also sound very similar in other languages. For example, exponent sounds very similar in French or Spanish or Portuguese or Italian. So having these words or having a language chart or just simply printing out a glossary handout for the child or student to have available to reference during a lesson will be very important. Word walls are probably one of the most important things that you can have for an English language learner in the classroom. And specifically, you should have one for each individual unit you're teaching. In the middle picture, this is an example of a algebra class, and basically very easily points out all the mathematical vocabulary. And having this posted in the classroom is a great reference for an English language learner to reference during a mathematical conversation so they don't fall behind or confused. For example, it explains what a coefficient is very easily and visually for a student to reference. And then mathematical vocabulary lists, I think, are also very important. I know, I'm sorry, I'm not supposed to say think, but this is also something that is in the literature that shows that many of our English language words have different meanings. For example, subtraction can be also referenced in a math class as the difference of, the less than, a minus, a takeaway,